All right, folks, my name is Tim Black. Thank you so much for joining us. We're here live on the Tim Black Show today. I have a great opportunity to have two great guests. One of them you're awfully familiar with on this channel. The other you may be familiar with, but it's the first time on the channel. Of course, I have Dr. West, an author, professor of philosophy, public intellectual, and a presidential candidate for the Truth and Justice Party, my brother Dr. West, and also another doctor, Dr. Melina Abdullah. She's a professor of Pan-African Studies of California, community organizer, founding member of Black Lives Matter, director of Black Lives Matter Grassroots, and they're both my guests. Give it up for them both, please.
Thank you.
Wow, first of all, thank you much for your time, folks. I saw that the announcement on the Tavis Smiley show yesterday. We watched it with great anticipation and excitement. And then I saw Dr. Melina. She was on Mark Lamont Hill, another great brother. And I'm just so proud to have you here following up on that. And I'd like to jump right into it. With Dr. West, what made you choose Dr. Melina as your vice presidential pick?
Brother, you know that all three of us come from a great tradition of a great people that have the highest levels of excellence defined in terms of deep vision and courage. And I said to myself, who would actually meet standards of high vision and courage over time, decade after decade? See, a lot of politicians choose a little strategy and tactic, some Machiavellian calculation about what the ticket looks like. No. We come out of a tradition where we want the best. And that's precisely why I went with my dear sister Melina. I said, who did Count Basie choose when he's playing piano? He chose Billie Holiday. Who did Berry Gordy chose when it was Marvin Gaye and Tammy Terrell? We ain't got the Peaches and Herb yet. We got a rich tradition of the highest levels of standards in each context. Now, I'm just talking about the musicians, but I'm talking in each context. And anybody who understands the history of our dear sister, and she's a doctor, she's a freedom fighter, she's a love warrior, she's a wounded healer, and she's an intellectual, but organically linked with the people. And the common denominator is she got a love of the people connected to that excellence. And that's why I'm full of joy. And that's why when Anahita and myself, we called it, we reflected on it with the team, all of us just came out with a big smile on our faces. And I still got one.
Me too. Me too.
That leads me perfectly to the next question. Dr. Abdullah, what made you accept? I mean, politics is a dirty, dirty game, and I'm sure you're aware of that. What made you say, okay, this is for me?
The long and short of it, it was God. It was God made me say yes. I had been inspired by Dr. West. Dr. West knows this, that my first time meeting him, I was an undergrad student at Howard University, and Julius Bailey brought him to campus, and I got to have conversation with him. I was inspired by Race Matters. I was inspired by Democracy Matters, am inspired still by the Radical King and all of his work. And then I got to march with him in Ferguson. He came and spoke up for Pan-African Studies when they were trying to defund ethnic studies. And Dr. West has just been an inspiration. And then when he came to the 10th anniversary for Black Lives Matter last summer, July of 2023, and he had already announced his candidacy for president, I was inspired by his candidacy. Who runs on a platform of truth, love, and justice, right? That's a platform I can get behind. And so, I'm grateful that when he would come to LA, I'd been connected and was able to come and introduce him a couple of times, was an enthusiastic supporter of his campaign, had him on a radio show with me, and just felt very honored by sharing space with him. And I thought he and Anahita were calling to talk about the radio program. And then they paused, and there's very few pauses in conversation with Dr. West. And they asked me, and I told him, like, my soul soared, and I don't think I said this to you, Dr. West, but I haven't felt that way since I gave birth to my third child, right? That my spirit hasn't said yes like that or been filled like that since giving birth. And then I pulled myself back into myself and said, let's have a few conversations with the people who are important to us first and then get back to each other. And so I talked with my children and my mom and, you know, my organizing community, and everybody else felt the same way I felt. And so never intended to run for office, but here I am.
Wow, what an answer to a question. What a lot of depth. Give people a real sense to the type of person that you are, Dr. Abdullah. And I'm excited. I'd heard your name before. A couple of years ago, you were really making a lot of noise as far as press for us content creators who cover the news, I'm sure you're aware of that. And then when I say, well, let me look her up. And when I looked her up, as I told my people yesterday, I was overwhelmed with all the information that's out there, all the content, all the activism, all the organizing, all the speeches, it's just a plethora of you. So people who have questions, we're going to get to some things, but Dr. Melina is an open book. And if you have additional questions, that's cool. But just know she's touched on many. One of the clips that I shared with my people, Dr. Abdullah, was one when you were in Los Angeles, as Dr. West alluded to offline before we went live. You were talking about being Black on purpose. And I knew that was going to resonate with my audience. I had to choose one. So that's the one I chose. But as I looked at the policies for Dr. West, my next question is, what policies, are there particular policies that bind you together in this process? Are there a couple or a few that really resonate to, like, I don't know, that motivates you in a certain way?
For me?
Yeah, Dr. Melina, please.
Well, I went through, that was during that period, right, where we said we're going to use our heads as well as our hearts, right? And I went through the platform, and there's nothing that I disagree with. Now, that's rare. That's saying something, right? But I've also been a reader of his, right? So I already know where he stands. I've shared space with him, so I know where his heart is, where his energy is. One of the things I love about Dr. West is he's a brilliant mind, but beyond that, he's such a kind soul, right? He makes you feel like you are God's child. He reminds you you're God's child. And that is the most important thing for me. When we look at the platform, it was really important for me, especially in this political moment, that we are courageous in where we stand, that we say not simply we want a permanent ceasefire now, but we want a free Palestine. Dr. West is unafraid to say we want a free Palestine. We want a free Palestine. We can't have peace without a free Palestine, right? Dr. West is unafraid to say, you know, when we talk about racial justice, we got to talk about reparations, right? How do you get to fairness without reparations? And the truth of it, reparations requires a lot of things, and it requires a check, right? That we want to talk about education, educational justice, and that Dr. West is a longtime educator, also understands that education needs to embrace a liberatory model that is the basis of ethnic studies, of Black studies. And also, we also need to make education accessible to everyone, that there are certain universal rights that all people should have just by virtue of being born. So education is one, health is one, housing is one, clean water. Flint still doesn't have clean water. People think the time has passed. They still don't have clean water, right? You know, so these are the things. There's nothing on that policy platform that I disagree with. And I'm excited to be building out some additional points, including gender justice points.
Absolutely.
Dr. West, could you add to that? Anything you'd like to add, sir?
Well, it's hard to add to that. I mean, it's been said with such insight and power. I think that, part of the challenge that we have is when Black folk get together, people think that somehow it's diminishing rather than enriching. You see, that the Black freedom movement has always been the leaven in the democratic loaf, just like the anti-colonial struggles of Africa have been leaven in the freedom loaf of the world. And so when you get Black folk together, people say, oh, you must be going in a corner. No, you misunderstand. You see, when you see a sister like this, you see, she says she's proud to be a Black woman writer because she embraces all of what it means to wrestling with what it means to be human. So you don't run away from your Blackness. You don't run away from your female, your womanness and so forth. You dig deeper into the humanity. And I think that's precisely what this ticket is about. You see, that symbolically and substantively, America's going to have to undergo a paradigm shift. And see, when they see politicians, when they see leaders grounded in the best of Black America and the best of the Black freedom struggle with a vision for everybody, not just in the United States. We're concerned about poor and working people in Africa, in Asia, in Europe, in the Caribbean, in Latin America, but it's rooted on a chocolate sided town, and we don't apologize about that. I'm not apologizing for my mama and my daddy in Shiloh Baptist Church. And the same is true of my dear sister in terms of her own spiritual shapings as a Muslim woman now, and then grounded on the East Bay context. I mean, East Oakland, we can just have a whole reflection on East Oakland, what they produce in terms of our tradition, though, brother. Good God Almighty. But it's about, where does our courage come from? And we live in a moment in which most of our politicians are cowardly. They calculating and cowardly. Whereas we want to be courageous, and we root it in whatever it is. It could be Islam, it could be Christianity, it could be Judaism, it could be secular. But where does your courage come from? Because your courage has to be manifest at this moment of overwhelming catastrophe. That's why it's a blessing to run with my dear sister.
Got it. You know, I like to speak directly to some of the questions people threw out at me. As one of the most outspoken supporters of Dr. West, Dr. Abdullah, I often get all these, incoming, about
Right.
Dr. West, you know what I mean? And it could be tough standing there. So I would like to point out a couple things and have you both address them. For Dr. West, you know this one, Dr. West. Oh, the brother, I love Dr. West, but the reason why he's not getting enough traction with Black folks is he's always brotherisms. He's brother. He's talking too much about others and other brothers instead of just the brothers. And Dr. West, could you respond to that critique?
Well, no, I mean, people have a right to be wrong, though, brother. I love them even when they're wrong. My brotherism does not in any way cut off my access to the shaping of myself as a free Black man. No, not at all. If I call a vanilla brother a brother, that doesn't mean that Jamal and Roosevelt somehow are less because they're Black. No, not at all. I come out of Shiloh Baptist Church, man, and that's chocolate all the way down. And that views everybody made in the image and likeness of God, so that the brotherism does not in any way diminish or tarnish my commitment to Black people or my commitment to the Black cause. Now, it's true that a lot of times people might see me on TV talking about Gaza a lot, because the people who invite me raise questions about the war. The war has been raging. We know it's criminal. We know that America's been lying on it. We know that the war crimes that are being enabled by Biden and Harris and the others need to be called out. So let's say, look, like every time you're on television, you're talking about the war, I want to hear about the mass incarceration regime. I want to hear about inadequate housing. I want to hear about healthcare not available. I say, oh, I'm talking about that when I'm speaking, but I only get those few minutes on television. And so I can make the connection between the criminality of treating our Palestinian brothers the way they're being treated, brothers and sisters and siblings, the way they're being treated in Gaza, and the criminality of the American prison system, and the criminality of the grotesque wealth inequality, and the criminality of domestic violence, and so forth and so on. So I can understand what they're saying, but I think they're wrong, though. That's why I do think they're wrong. They think they're trying to confine me in a way that I will not allow them to confine me.
I appreciate you speaking to that, and addressing it up front. And the Gaza issue, I tell folks, and, I tell them, first of all, I don't speak for the campaign. I just speak for Tim Black. And, when Dr. West goes on these channels for these particular purposes, that's what the topic is. I said, but Dr. West has spoken about these issues, about issues affecting our community so often as well. I mean, you could find, he's spoken about it on my channel, other places. It's right. I've been working on not getting upset when they do it, because I know where you're coming from, I learned, like, okay, these are new people, Tim. It's not the same person. It's a new person who hasn't heard the explanation yet.
Right.
Dr. Abdullah, yesterday, when I heard the announcement of you, and I looked up and I saw you were co-founder of Black Lives Matter, I was happy and I was scared. Well, not scared. I was worried, frankly, because I'm like, oh man, okay. Being that outspoken, right, for Dr. West, here we go again. They're gonna be like, oh, Tim, that organization. Oh God, here you go, Tim Black. The money and this and that and the stigma. What are you doing? What's Dr. West doing? Was she a part of this? Was she a part of that? So I didn't have to speak to her yesterday, but I'm sure those questions are coming. How would you respond to people that are concerned about baggage from Black Lives Matter, the global Black Lives Matter, not the grassroots? Could you speak to that?
Sure, I'll try to be as succinct as possible. I'll say this. I was one of the people who helped birth Black Lives Matter as a movement, July 13th, 2013, when the murder of 17-year-old Trayvon Martin was acquitted. Thousands of us poured out into the streets, and we were just mamas and educators and babas and bus drivers and, just people who saw in the face of Trayvon Martin our own children, right? What did Barack Obama say? If I had a son, he'd look like Trayvon. Well, I have a son, and he actually looks like Trayvon, right? Same shiny brown skin and dancing eyes. And, we couldn't let that pass. We couldn't let them steal his life and it goes unanswered. And so we pledged to build a movement, not a moment. And for 7 years, we built that movement with absolutely no money. We built that movement, funding it out of our own pockets. All right, who has extra money to buy the $1 burritos from El Pollo Loco this week for the meeting, right?
Right.
And, I developed a friendship with the Costco pizza man who would throw in a few extra pies for me when we were having meetings, right? And that's what we did. And then in 2020, when people couldn't look away as George Floyd was being strangled in the middle of the street in front of everybody, right? As that little girl had the courage to put it on film and then share it with the world. We can't forget who did that, right? I'm sorry. That's what happens when you're at home doing interviews, right? And so, we couldn't look away. We couldn't look away. And people were enraged and poured out into the streets. People were enraged and said, what do I have to offer? And money poured in. And I was most concerned in making sure, I described it, I was watching a TV show, Dr. West, I don't know if you ever watched that show, Lovecraft Country on HBO.
No, I missed that.
Ooh, go back and watch that.
Is that right?
Oh, starring Journey Smollett. Oh, man.
Oh, I got to ask Anahita about that.
Yeah, you got to pull that up. But that had come out during the midst of the uprisings. And so I described 2020 as a moment when the world cracked wide open, right? And so we had an opportunity to make the most of that moment. And I was most concerned about building the movement in the streets. And Patrisse Cullors, who's one of the co-founders, had incorporated the Global Network Foundation, and that's where the funds were received. Unfortunately, you know, the opponents, our enemies do what they do. And they came for her, they came for me. There were a lot of hits, and it hit Patrisse really hard. And I'll share, because she shared that, you know, she was struggling in terms of her mental health, and she backed away. And ultimately, even though she had intended to put all the resources into the movement on the ground, which was taking form as Black Lives Matter grassroots, the legal authority was left with these highly paid consultants who then stole those resources, kept those resources for themselves. And so I was never a part of that side of things. I was never a part of the Global Network Foundation, or a part of any of these other things, the purchasing of properties, the paying of ourselves, the paying of the contracts that were written. That was never me. I never received a contract, never received a check, nor did I write a check or purchase any of those contracts. So what we did decide is, even with the theft of the resources of the movement, we weren't going to give them the movement. So we are still boots on the ground, whether we have money or no money. And we have a little more money than we did before 2020. So at least now we can pay for food at the meetings, right? And we do have a few staff. And so that's a good thing. But we're moving forward. We're 33 chapters all around the country, and very blessed that the entire Black Lives Matter grassroots team is enthusiastic about this and understands that this is a moment where we can uplift what we believe in, that when we talk about abolition, we now have a way to explain what we mean. What do we mean when we say defund the police? What do we mean when we say abolish prisons, right? And so I'm grateful to be in community with so many beautiful organizers, including families of those who were killed by police and white supremacy all around the country. And today, I just want to uplift the names. Dante Wright, you'll remember he was murdered in Brooklyn Center, Minnesota on this day. And today is his anniversary. So I want to say his name, as well as Kenneth Ross Jr., who was killed by Gardena police back in 2018.
Lord, 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 Lord. And we were talking about our dear brother Dexter Reed in Chicago.
Right.
Nearly 100 bullets. One brother in a car pulled over because he ain't got no seat belt on.
41 seconds, Dr. West.
Was it 41 seconds, man?
41 seconds.
Geez, and we got brother Mumia Abu-Jamal's birthday coming up. He's going to be 70. The level of courage that he's been exhibiting on death row, still in love with not just Black people, but oppressed people all around the world, truth teller at the highest level. All of these voices playing such fundamental roles. And that's why I think people need to understand that there's always a variety of different folk in any movement. But when you're looking at Sister Melina, you're looking at somebody of great integrity and moral consistency. Now, none of us are pure or pristine. None of us are free of spot or wrinkle, as a Black preacher would say. And I'm not a Black preacher. I got too much gangster in me for that. But I'm in the pew. I'm in the pew. I'm a Christian right. In the pew. And I think the important thing is that we've got to be able to get behind movements that are casting a light on any form of oppression, be it capitalist oppression, patriarchal oppression, imperial oppression, homophobic, transphobic, whatever oppression it is. But white supremacist oppression tied to those processes is always the catalyst for any major movement in the United States. And that's very much what this campaign's about, here and abroad.
You know, I think you did just kind of speak to my next question, which was going to be Dr. West, is knowing that information is out there, knowing the job that's been done on the Black Lives Matter from media, and that really an in-depth explanation of how big we're talking, the different factions, the different organizations, how they're disconnected or connected. Most people never heard this story. What were your thoughts as far as how it would impact the campaign, and what made you say, let me go ahead with this? Dr. Melina is such a great human being, a great asset, a great fighter for justice. We'll be okay. We're going to go forward with this. What made you do that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, people, they say we talk about baggage and so forth. You see, for me, anybody and any movement that is fundamentally committed to loving Black people, to loving poor people, to loving working people, that's no baggage for me at all. That is a empowerment. That's an ennoblement. Now, no, human beings are human beings, but I see that love. I see that commitment. I see that profound dedication in Sister Melina and the network. 164 weeks every Wednesday in front of the police department to let them know we love our children. We love our grandmothers. We love our mothers. We love our daddies. And you've been shooting them down. We need the abolition of police murder, abolition of police brutality, the abolition of police departments that can't treat Black people like human beings. And then we'll think constructively of how we create our systems of public safety. Of course we need public safety. Of course we need protection. Of course we need service and so forth. But we've got to abolish what is coming at us in the same way that Frederick Douglass wanted to abolish slavery and Ida B. Wells wanted to abolish Jim Crow, and Martin King and Fannie Lou Hamer want to abolish poverty and abolish unhousedness. Abolition is a fundamental theme of the Black freedom movement.
Staying right there, Dr. West, I've been reading things on your website, doing some research on it, and I realized that choosing a vice presidential candidate or running mate changes things as far as ballot access. Could you explain to folks how this impacts the Justice Party, Justice for All Party, getting on the ballots across the country?
Yeah, because in so many states, you can't even begin the process of gathering the signatures unless you have the presidential candidate and the vice presidential candidate. Absolutely, that's true. And we're reaching that point because so many parties don't make this kind of announcement until August. See, that's the corporate duopoly. That's the ruling class with their two parties. Democrats on the one hand, militaristic, tied to genocide in Gaza, and the Republicans leading the country towards the second civil war, neo-fascists. So they don't have to worry. They'll make their announcements August, September, or something like that, you see. But for those of us who don't have that kind of insider power, we make the announcements now in order to be on the ballot as a process of gaining access to getting on the ballot. And for me, it's a beautiful thing because be able to have, the whole spring and summer and fall with Sister Melina with her powerful voice and analysis, vision, and most importantly, the courage and love. See, that's the bottom line, though, brother. It's the courage and love, man. See, a lot of people don't like to highlight what it means to take the hits when you really love poor people and really love Black people. Yeah. When you have that kind of love, you got to put on the whole armor because the hits are coming at you, the bows and arrows and the bullets and people invading her house. We won't get into all the details, but you got to have love not to give up. You got to have love not to pull back. And so all of these bystanders and all of these spectators who say X and Y, it's empty, it's vacuous because they don't have enough love to execute. When you look at that, Sister Melina, you're looking at a freedom fighter who executes on the ground with the organizational capacity and most importantly, spiritual and moral capacity to stay in the fight even when they're trying to crush you. And that's what people need to realize. And that's what I explain to folks. People come up to me, in the last day and a half, and I've had some wonderful comments like, oh my God, all Black ticket. Oh my God, you got a Muslim woman, brilliant woman on the ticket. is this America? I had one black brother come up to me and said, I thought you were in the King legacy, but now look like you moving to Malcolm. This is an all-black ticket. I say, my brother, I've always had the same love. It's the same love. That was your perceptions. You say, it's the same love. Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm kind of wondering how far we should go to blow the horn here for Melina, because see, I don't want people to walk away without knowing some stuff. Dr. Melina is a bad sister, and she is a true activist. Dr. Melina, I know you've been arrested a number of times. You've been on the front lines for a number of issues. Could you blow your horn just a little bit? Because I don't want people watching to not get a true sense in them, get swept up into what I know is out there. And I believe there's some bad faith actors out there, and they have been out there, who are just chomping at the bit, saying a bunch of negative crap. So could you give them a little bit about what your story's been?
Sure. Well, I think that what's been raised is that you can't go at white supremacist, patriarchal, heteronormative capitalism full force and not expect to suffer their wrath, right? And so, if you don't have no battle scars, you ain't been in a battle, right? So over the course of time, I've been arrested 8 times, right? We got to remember, Dr. King was arrested 40 times. So I got a lot of catching up to do, but I've been arrested. And I should also say I've been arrested 8 times for the movement, right? I was raised in a certain way, and, there's a few juvenile arrests that we shall not talk about, but arrested 8 times for righteous stuff. I'll say that, right?
Gotcha.
And, had guns pointed at me. There was a time when we were protesting the district attorney, when her husband opened the door, pointed a gun at my chest, just inches from my chest, and said, "I'll shoot you," with a loaded gun pointed at my chest. My home has been swatted 3 times now by LAPD with my children in it. And that was one time I was positive that they were gonna kill me, right? We'd seen Corinne Gaines be murdered with her child on her lap.
Yes, we did.
But my children were in the house. So if I didn't come out, I was afraid. Maybe I always say I'm not afraid of anything, but that's one, that
Yes.
they might come in and my children were there, right? And then once we pushed back on them, they swatted us 2 more times. I've had white supremacists pull up in front of my house in motorhomes twice now. I've been assaulted. I've had lots of things happen. And I'm saying all this, but also recognizing that, again, all of us bear battle scars if we've really been in a battle, right? So I think about this community. Sister Sheila Bates, little bitty sister, right, was beaten brutally by Torrance PD. Baba Akili was arrested. We got Sister Brittany Martin sitting in prison right now, for speaking words to a cop in Sumter, South Carolina, for saying, "I'm willing to die for the Black," right? She is in prison right now, mother of 6 children. And we have to remember that as we fight for Mumia Abu-Jamal, we have to also fight for our contemporary freedom fighters. Let's not forget Sister Brittany Martin. And so I'm just saying all that to say that lots of us have battle scars. I have my share. And I am also honored to be able to continue to get on that battlefield, and grateful that Dr. West understands that these battle scars are also proof that we got a whole army fighting alongside us. So the so-called baggage also means that it's not just, it's our names on the ballot technically, but it's also thousands and tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of people who believe in this vision coming with us.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Wow.
Yes.
Yeah, it's just that first of all, thank you for that in-depth explanation response. I didn't know about that sister with the 6 children. I'm gonna have to get on top of that and cover that. You know, right now I hear a lot of comparisons, Dr. West, between your campaign and the RFK Jr. campaign. And with your presence here, it'd be great if we could draw some distinctions. We know there's Gaza war. That's a huge distinction. Just want to switch gears a little bit. Those folks that say, well, Tim Black, someone actually said this to me today. Tim Black, you know, RFK is really doing well, and you know, we should get behind him because, you know, he has a better chance of defeating Biden and defeating Trump. Dr. West, I want them to understand that just because RFK is an independent does not mean doesn't mean he's the same type of independent that you're, you know, campaign that you're running. Could you make some distinctions to kind of set that record straight?
Well, first we have to be very clear that RFK Jr. is enabling a vicious genocide in Gaza in his language and rhetoric when he calls precious Palestinians the most pampered people in regard to aid. That's not just a lie, that's a lie that enables a crime. Now, he's not there physically doing the killing, but he's further to the right than Newt Gingrich when it comes to genocide in Gaza, let alone Biden. So it just strikes me when I hear all these folks saying he's so progressive. And I'm thinking, do Palestinians mean anything to you? Do their babies mean anything to you? Please. He says the Israeli army is the most moral army. I said, get off the crack pipe, brother. The IDF is engaged in genocide, crimes against humanity, war crimes, and crimes of genocide. And we could debate publicly, privately, whatever. Same is true in terms of his belief in what he calls free market capitalism. Free market capitalism, what is he talking about? We live in a monopoly capitalist economy in which 1% of the population owns 90% of the wealth, 3 individuals own wealth equivalent to 50% of Americans, 160 million Americans. What kind of free market capitalism you talking about? You living in a different world. You out of touch with reality. Now, I know the last name Kennedy means much, and I hate that any member of the family gets killed. John and Robert, his precious father, and so forth. So that when I hear these progressives talking about how wonderful he is, I don't know what they're talking about. I know that Timothy Mellon gave him $20 million, gave Trump $15 million. We're working on our first million because we don't receive any monies in form of PAC at all. So that sets us at a major disadvantage, you see. But that's a matter of principle. We want money only from the people to make sure that these billionaires don't have a stranglehold on any words that we have to say. We are not on anybody's plantation. And that's crucial when it comes to myself and Sister Melina. We're not on anybody's plantation. We're free. We are free Black woman, Black man. And a lot of people say, well, I don't like this talk about religion. No, I'm a Jesus-loving free Black man. She's an Allah-loving free Black woman. We're unapologetic about our Blackness. We're unapologetic about our faith. We're not unapologetic about our mamas, our daddies, our children, our partners, our comrades, across the board. That's what makes us like John Coltrane and Mary Lou Williams. We free all the way down.
You know, Dr. Abdullah, one of the things that I try to point out to folks, because not everyone's aware of what's going on in Gaza as far as they believe that mainstream media narrative of October 6th or the 7th. They believe that narrative, but I try to tell folks, I'm like, and then the ones that don't believe it, and they say, well, you know, they don't agree with what's happening there. I try to tell them, well, you got to realize that if folks won't support Palestinians, the likelihood of them supporting Black people in America is nil. So, because you speak to maybe your perspective on this, and if you see my point of view on this, I know that it's some folks who are so worried about rent, mortgage, keeping food on the table. They got local problems, issues affecting their families, but they need to understand the leadership in Washington. If they won't stand up for Palestinians, the likelihood of them really caring about Black people here I think is small.
Well, thank you. And let's connect it real clearly, right? When they're spending hundreds of billions, I can't even fathom that amount of money, hundreds of billions of dollars, sending it to Israel to slaughter Palestinian people. There's a very real connection, right? We know that when you spend money one place, you don't have money for another place. What else could you do with that money? We could be housing all of our folks. We could be providing health care for all of our folks. We could be providing free education from birth to doctorate for all of our folks. We could be doing the things that we want to have. We want to fund. I love what somebody asked me, you can't be a yeller all your life, right? Because I hit 50, right? They said, you're going to be yelling all your life. And then I looked on Instagram and the Cold Pink ladies were in Congress yelling, right? And I said, shoot, if they could do it, I could do it, right? Right? I could be a yeller all my life, right? But I think
Sister Medea Benjamin and them, that's what
Sister Medea Benjamin is a yeller. Jody Evans is a yeller.
That's right.
And what they've been saying is fund your districts, not genocide, right? And we got to remember that we demand funding for us. You're funding genocide. We demand funding for us. But I think also for Black people, there is a historic alignment with the people of Palestine because we know it's almost transgenerational memory that kicks in, right? When we look at what's happening, the dehumanization of Palestinian people, the separation of families in Palestine, the theft of land, right? All of this triggers our transgenerational memory. And so it's one of the reasons why on October 9th, Black Lives Matter Grassroots was the first Black organization to release a statement in solidarity with the Palestinian people, because we saw in them ourselves. And so we have to be courageous. Dr. West always talks about courage. We have to be courageous enough to say, yes, we want a permanent ceasefire now, and we want to free Palestine, because that's how you get to peace. You got to have a free Palestine. And so I think that's where this ticket is different, that we're saying, an immediate permanent ceasefire is absolutely necessary, and we have to go further.
Absolutely.
Dr. West, I saw
that means an end to the occupation, which is a precondition of any talk about freedom for Palestinians or anybody else. It means that Palestinian dignity and Palestinian equality, Palestinian security, Palestinian safety has to go hand in hand with Jewish dignity, Jewish equality, Jewish security, Jewish safety. And a lot of people think, well, you say free Palestine, you're calling for the annihilation of Jews. No. Our Jewish brothers and sisters just as precious as Palestinian brothers and sisters. We want dignity and equality. We don't want a two-state solution where Palestinians are still so subordinate to Israeli supremacy that their destiny is still thwarted. No, we want equality and dignity. We don't want a Holocaust. We don't want a show up. We don't want a Nakba. We don't want a catastrophe for any peoples, let alone those two. But we're committed to the Palestinian dignity and the Palestinian equality with the safety and security and dignity and equality of Jews and others in that state, as I understand it. You see, but we have to be honest about the ending of that occupation being a precondition.
Yeah, I saw that Biden they're urging now that they do a ceasefire. Are they going far enough, Dr. West? Have you put out an official statement responding that President Biden's stance on this? I see they're moving up slightly, but of course not quick enough.
Well, part of the problem, though, brother, when you have 15,000 precious Palestinian babies who've already been murdered, and all you can come up with is an electoral strategy concerned about Muslim votes to inch towards ceasefire as a way of getting them to vote for you rather than protect their precious parents and grandparents and children. You see, there's something that is so spiritually sick about that. The very way in which you look at the world. And we know Biden himself being an Irish brother, if those were Irish babies, you think he'd have the same attitude? No, that's where the white supremacy kicks in. That's where the racism kicks in. See, we believe an Irish baby got the same value as a Palestinian baby. If that were happening to the Irish, we raise our voices too. What's happening to black folk? Raise our voices. Happened to Jews. We raise our voices. Happened to Palestinians? We raise our voices. Happened to Palestinians now? No, we have to wait for 15,000 and inch toward a ceasefire so we can get a vote. How empty can you get? No moral fiber at all. And that's not just Biden, that's Harris. Now, Harris is very much like our dear sister Melina, right? Grew up in California, Berkeley, Howard University. Melina goes to Howard and comes out a freedom fighter. Sister Harris goes to Howard and says, America's not a racist society. Something was wrong. Something is deeply wrong. And then enables a genocide. Oh, you got certain similarities, radical differences when it comes to who Sister Melina is, Professor Abdullah is, you see. Why? Because she's making choices as a thinker, as a doer, as a lover of the people. That's what this campaign is about, and that's why I'm so blessed, and we all are so blessed to have her.
Absolutely. That's when I voiced yesterday and said, well, we got an all-black ticket. That's an amazing thing. And I know people were getting very excited about that. I didn't want to steal the thunder from it, but I wanted to say, but it's the right type of black people. I want to slide that in so badly because I'm like, oh my God, you got to understand, all skin folk ain't kinfolk.
You ain't lying. You can have Clarence Thomas in here, as a cousin, and you in deep trouble. You in deep trouble now.
And there's some white folks who might share your ideology and your vision and your morals that you'd rather have with you than some black folks who don't. So, we gotta kind of, be circumspect when we start choosing who we gonna rock with. We can't just be looking through a lens of race. I just covered as you talked about Chicago, the brother who was gunned down by the Chicago Police Department.
Oh, Brother Dexter.
Yeah, Brother Dexter. Yeah. Dexter. And I just did that story yesterday. And the other thing, and I almost feel bad even bringing this up, but I guess I should, only because we're talking. I want Dr. West and Dr. Melina to respond to it. Of course, you're going to hear this everywhere you go. You're going to be throwing a race to Trump. You're going to be helping Trump. I know you're going to hear that too as well, Dr. Melina. What would be your response to that? Are you going to be on this ticket? You'll be pulling, of course, all black votes are owned. Biden owns them. That's his property. Here you come trying to help Cornel West steal them. What would be your response to that?
I would do something that I rarely do, which is put on my political scientist hat. That's my PhD is in political science. I study voting. And there's no evidence that says that third-party candidates are pulling most of their votes away from the Democrats or the Republicans. What I believe we're doing, now this is my mama hat, right? Is as the mother of a 20 and a 17-year-old who will be voting for the first time in a presidential election in November, I know they would have never voted for the devil incarnate, also known as Donald Trump, or the person they call Genocide Joe, right? They wouldn't have voted for either of them. They would have either stayed home or only voted down ballot, right? What we're doing is saying we give you someone to vote for. We give you someone to vote for. We're rejecting that fear-mongering where they say, if you don't vote for Biden, you're going to get Trump. Well, if either of the two major parties want our vote, they should be better candidates. They should They should do what's right. They should earn our vote. They are not earning our vote. They are not earning our vote. So we are, and Dr. West, I hope this is okay for me to say, we're running a campaign that says, you know, what's the saying? Faith and fear can't occupy the same space, right? So we're saying vote, be faithful in your vote. Be faithful in your vote. Don't vote based on fear. Vote based on your faith, what you believe in, what you know we have a right to, what you know we can have if we all get behind it. And so that's why we're running. And we're not afraid to run based on faith and based on an understanding of what our people want, need, and deserve.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And the only thing that breaks the back of fear in the ultimate sense is the depth of the love that you have. And your voice is tied to your vote, but your voice is deeper than your vote. The vote is just one small part of your voice.
Right.
And we're looking at people to be stronger, more faithful, and more courageous, more loving persons in the long run, not just in a voting booth. Right. See, that's what makes this a moment and a movement. And we come from a great people who in the past had their backs against the wall. Pharaoh on both sides of the bloody Red Seas. What you gonna do? Sing a song. Hold a hand. Tell a story. Give a hug. Keep on, keep it on. And then organize, and maybe we can reach a point where we end up with two Black folk who love the folk enough to run for higher office, to run the American empire in order to dismantle it with the anti-militarism and anti-war sensibility, with a critique of the organized greed of predatory capitalist processes, and then to zero in on that vicious poison, the white supremacy that has played such a fundamental role in keeping all of this social misery alive. That's what we're about. And people say, oh, you must lose your mind. That's too much. Well, we're going to do all we can while we're here. And that's precisely what this campaign is about. And that's why, again, I'm blessed to be with my dear sister, because her life, her work, her witness embodies so much of what I'm talking about. See, one of the things they asked me about, well, you know, people have, neither one of us have experience in politics. If you running for justice for 35, 40 years, that's a lot of good experience for politics. Most politicians haven't been running for justice. Most politicians have been running for office. Ain't got nothing to do with justice. And they get in there and sell their souls for a mess of pottage, and we're surprised. See, Sister Melina, the kind of sister, she don't sell her soul. I'm the kind of brother, I don't sell my soul. No. Bring on the fight. We keep swinging.
Dr. West, you know, you only chose Dr. Melina because she's a woman, you know, because of DEI, you know, DEI. Brother West, give me a soundbite on the DEI nonsense. First with Dr. West and then with Dr. Melina, if you could. What are your thoughts about this fabricated nonsense of, you know, anytime you include Black people now, it's a DEI, or women as well? Yeah. I mean, it's part of the backlash, of course, against the Black freedom movement. But DEI was always a bad idea in terms of the categories. See, anybody died for diversity. You die because you're fighting for justice. You don't die to be included. No, you die to preserve your dignity, to be part of any system that needs change and fundamental transformation. So truth, justice, and love is not the same thing as diversity, equity, and inclusion. DEI is a bureaucratic construct to deodorize the struggle for justice, to make it more palatable, to make it more sanitized. And once it becomes sanitized, you forget about the injustices of the past. So reparations drops out, and it's just about diversity. And that's what happened to the Supreme Court. It started with reparations, affirmative actions, but tied to the injustice of the Black people. And then it shifts to, we just want diversity, especially for the white students. They have a sense of what it's like to come from the hood and not from the vanilla suburbs. And so now we're talking about justice.
justice. And so it's a backlash against our concern about justice. And it's a backlash in terms of our concern about the truth. You want to just ban the books or make sure people don't have access to critical race theory. How come? You're afraid of the truth. You want to still live based on the efficacy of lies. And we have to just be honest about that and tell that truth about the lies, you see. Very much so. But I know that's yeah, about your system.
And I think anytime a system gives you something, so we got to remember where DEI comes from, right? DEI was a crumb that was thrown at us out of our demands, right? Out of demands for true racial justice, right? They said, here's DEI. Our school is going to hire a DEI officer, right? So they threw a crumb, but then here's the insincerity of it. As soon as they think that our movement is weakening, they snatch the crumb back. You don't even get to keep the dang crumb, right?
Ooh, that's a deep point. That's a deep point.
So Dr. West, as always, is right. Like, we have to remember justice is the bottom line. Justice is the bottom line. And we can't be distracted or, think that we can be, we shouldn't be bought off by or placated by crumbs thrown at us from time to time.
Well, I appreciate your insights on this, because I disagree with Charlemagne when he said it was garbage. But his explanation for a reason why he thought it was garbage was nothing like what you both said here today. It's totally different. He was like, it's going to be backlash. He didn't say it was garbage because it was ineffective. It was placation, trying to placate us and not give us the actual justice that we were demanding to begin with.
It was never enough. So his argument was that it was too much. Our argument is it was never enough. It was never enough. We're demanding justice. They gave us DEI. So it doesn't mean fire all the, so that's, I want to be clear. We're not saying they're justified in firing all the DEI officers.
Right.
What we're saying is it had to be, and the demands had to continue to move forward, and they had to be pushed to do something real, right? To do something bigger.
Got it.
We're supposed to be on his show tomorrow. I might ask my dear brother what his ideas are about this stuff. That's interesting. It'd be fascinating.
But he also said it was ineffective, but DEI's only been around a few years. How quick do you think one diversity officer can do anything? And some of them have done some good things, right? But how quick do you think you're going to be able to make substantive change when you're talking about hundreds and hundreds of years of racial oppression? One DEI officer is supposed to undo that over the span of a couple years.
My thing, Dr. Abdullah, was he talked about backlash because white people didn't want to hear about racial inclusion or racial diversity. Brother, we get backlash. If you're working in all white office like I had before, or predominantly white, you'll get backlash from the O.J. Simpson trial. You'll get backlash from a black Barbie doll or a black, the mermaid. You get backlash come from anything black related in society, from the fight over who won the basketball, the NCAA, to who won a boxing tournament, and who knocked out who Floyd Mayweather knocked out last week. So that's not a basis for why we should support a policy or not. You gotta dig a little bit deeper, I think.
Oh, indeed. And we have to keep in mind the class dimension of this thing. As much as we fight against white supremacy and it's going to move forward, the expansion of the black middle class, professional class, of the black bourgeoisie, that too often people view the black middle class progress as the fundamental litmus test of our movement, where the litmus test is what's happened with the black poor, what's happened with brothers and sisters in the hood. It's biblical, the least of these, the prisons. See, that's where you have to keep the focus on. And so you end up with DEI because it becomes one of the ways in which the society celebrates that you got a black middle class walking around like peacocks. And you say, no, no, no. We fight against white supremacy. Of course, there's going to be a black middle class, but the fundamental measure is the black, poor, and working class.
Right.
You see, because if the black, poor, and working class are being enhanced and empowered, then the black middle class and the others are going to do very well too. But it's easy to create a black middle class and forget about the black poor, forget about the black working class. So you end up with mass incarceration escalating right at the same time the black middle class is escalating. Won't say a mumbling word about the mass incarceration escalation and breakdancing about black middle class folk with all these black faces in high places, all the way up to presidents, vice presidents, and everything. We're supposed to be satisfied. Hey, no. No, we got our focus where it belongs.
Yeah, Dr. Melina, I've spoke about that. I'm trying to find the words. I'm sure you could speak to this this knee-jerk reaction we have to celebrate those celebrities and kind of overlook the poor black folks who are struggling and looking for how well we're doing by the celebrity success of our stars, our rappers, our actors, our spokesmodels, our politicians.
Right. I mean, I think they've also been used to really shame working class and poor folks, right? If Oprah can do it, what's wrong with you, right? And we have to remember that the system, Manning Marable writes about this and how capitalism underdeveloped Black America, right? That these systems were developed intentionally and deliberately to produce the outcomes that they do. There's a Skid Row in Los Angeles by design, right? That you now have to work 2, 3, 4 jobs to be able to pay your rent by design. And so the idea that there's a Black middle class and an even smaller group of Black wealthy folks is to shame you for something that the system was designed to create, right? And we have to remember that that's the truth. That the truth is that Black people who are still, the most impoverished of anybody else, right? Black mothers, especially, right? That is by design. And the beauty of our people is that we're surviving and creating beauty and creating culture and creating hope and building towards power nonetheless. But in the midst of it, we have to demand freedom for all our people.
Exactly. That is so true.
Wow. Yes.
And you think back, just go back 2 generations for all 3 of us. Just think about your grandmamas, your granddaddies, Louisiana, wherever it is. Just go back to that moment. All the hell they're catching, and yet all the dignity and determination and strength that they put forward in the face of that bombardment. That's a standard we got to meet, whatever our context is, that our grandparents didn't have PhDs the way Melina does and I do and so forth. Grandparents didn't have a radio show that thousands and thousands of folk sitting on the edge of their chairs waiting for the Tim Black show to come on like me and Anahita. No, that's not what grandmama and them had. Not at all. But they passed on something so rich and so deep that it's inside of us. And we got to be true to that, just like we got to be true to our children and our children's children. That's the greatness of a people. That's what this campaign's about. And it's a beautiful thing. There's joy in it. Yes, even when the police is invading your house, you get them out and you turn on some Marvin Gaye and Jill Scott. Hey, you got some joy right there because you're still there. You're still strong.
Well, I want to thank both of you once again for coming on the show and sharing your thoughts and letting us know what's happening. I want people to get excited. I want them to go to CornelWest2024.com. Volunteer. I'm sure you're accepting volunteers, Dr. West.
Oh, my God, yes. Very much so. And now we got West Abdullah. West Abdullah.
That's it. And there's a new section. They've already updated the website.
You see,
found out more about Dr. Abdullah on the website as well. And folks get involved. And once again, guys, thank you for taking time out your schedule. I look forward to seeing you more and just continue to cover your campaign.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having us. Really enjoyed our time.
Thank you.
Oh, love you and Sister Sheila. Love both of you all.
Appreciate you so much.
Indeed, indeed. Stay strong now.
Got it now. Go see them, guys. CornelWest2024.com. Thank y'all for tuning in. I'm Tim Black, and I'm out. I'll see you on the next one.